and a very warm and a very special welcome to all of you. It's a very special evening. The C.K. Prahalad Annual Memorial Lecture 2012. It's special also because of very special people. Gayatri and Deepa Prahalad, thank you very much for being here. My mentor, my guru, Mr. Tarun Das, the founding trustee of the Aspen Institute in India. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, a leader by thought, by deed, by action. Dr. C.K. Prahalad, or C.K. as he was known to some of us, was a thinker, a teacher, a visionary, passionate in his belief of India's inherent potential and its chosen destiny. He strongly felt that a country with 1 billion people should not look outward for best practices, but innovate next practices. He also demonstrated his belief that innovation should focus on those at the bottom of the pyramid. In one of his columns in the Harvard Business Review, he had concluded, executives are constrained not by resources, but by their imagination. As corporate citizens, we are expected to imagine, innovate, and succeed with the resources at our disposal. We create value that trickles down to levels that we are not sometimes aware of. It is therefore necessary that we never cease to imagine of better, of more efficient ways of doing business, of means to work around the limitation of resources, and of how we can create more value for all our stakeholders. The first ever Aspen program on value-based leadership in the mid-90s was in Goa, and it had Gopal as a participant. Gopal's association with Aspen is very long. It took several years after that to set up Aspen India in 2004, promoted by CII, but as an independent institution. Since last year, Goenka, who spent 25 years with CII, took over as the CEO and has made a huge difference to Aspen India's work. The founding and managing trustee of Aspen India, Mr. Tarun Das, who doesn't know about his capabilities? And if Aspen India is what it is because of him. Thank you, Dada. Before I invite Gopal, I'm going to invite a very young, a very enterprising lady to share some thoughts with us, Deepa Prahalad.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here with all of you for the first annual C.K. Prahalad Memorial Lecture. It means a great deal for all of us to have his contribution honored in this forum and to see aspects of my father's work being carried forward by many of you. I believe my brother and I have a far more daunting task in trying to be the inspiring parent he was to our own young children. It is my first time here in Kolkata, but few people know that my father spent a few months here early in his career with Union Carbide. It was his first time living away from home, and we grew up hearing stories about the city and legendary places like Fleury's. He even shared with us that this was the city where he made his first break with his conservative South Indian upbringing and sampled a beer for the first time. Throughout my father's life, the people and issues of India were never far from his mind and heart. It is a matter of pride for all of us that many of his ideas sparked debate and gained a wide following. However, during this visit, we have seen half of India quite literally and figuratively left powerless. And I am reminded of how much remains to be done. I would like to briefly reflect on my father's work and today's theme of innovation, myth, reality, and ideas with a focus on the Indian context. Let me begin with myth. I believe the hallmark of my father's work was challenging a commonly held myth that resources determine how innovative individuals and countries can be. His early work on strategic intent specifically focuses on how an organization's imagination and aspirations shape its destiny. In every forum, he challenged India to radically raise her aspirations. I think his faith in India can be seen in his admonition to India Inc., delivered more than a decade ago. A developing country is a state of mind and not a physical reality. Inefficiencies and dysfunctional behaviors, sheer lack of discipline, and disregard for productivity are not caused by resource constraints. They create resource constraints. All the icons of India today are proof that resource shortage is not an excuse for not creating world-class enterprises. I know that my father's immigrant experience and intellectual journey gave him the confidence that change and innovation was possible, but also the awareness that it can be painful. So he never lost his empathy for those who were struggling, whether it was managers or the poorest of the world. I also believe that his life experience gave all of his work a refreshing lack of presumption about where innovation can come from. This is clearly seen in his work at the bottom of the pyramid, where he argued that the poor represented a viable and profitable consumer market, and that the firms able to engage and co-create with them would ultimately become more competitive and innovative. This idea challenged corporate myths about the poor, but also urged business people to reimagine their roles as products and services for global markets are being created in poor countries. While finding the answers to poverty remains elusive, I believe he injected tremendous optimism and pragmatism into the debate, and in doing so, drew many of the world's best companies and minds to the issue. Second, reality. My father was determined to help India embrace her potential, but he knew that it would never happen without confronting some uncomfortable realities. While he helped many Indian companies innovate, he was equally concerned with governance and societal development. The gains from the first round of liberalization were profound. However, the data from India and other countries does not support the view that economic growth alone will resolve issues of corruption and social inequality. Growth, at best, is an enabler of social change. It is by no means a guarantor. What it may mean is that we have created a base of people who are hungry for change. In order for growth to create better outcomes for society at large, there needs to be governance in place that works. That is true in India as well as the United States, where the conduct of financial institutions grew more corrupt during periods of strong overall economic performance. Fairness rests on individuals, not financial standing. It was one of my father's greatest joys to see in India well on its journey to regaining her confidence, and that is why he turned his attention to helping awaken her conscience as well. He looked at corruption with fresh eyes, just as he had with poverty a few years prior. His urging to tackle this problem was not a condemnation, but a call to innovate and act. Whenever I forwarded him blogs and articles critical of his stance, some of them extremely harsh, he remained resolute. His response always came in the form of a question. Why would a country that was innovative enough to provide cell phone service for 1 cent a minute and world-class cataract surgery at the lowest cost in the world accept corruption as an intractable problem? He also refused to entertain the argument that India is where the West was at a similar stage in its development. While that may be true, the West never had 550 million people under the age of 25 to create a future for. My father loved India and believed in her potential, but he never believed that India would achieve prosperity unless it began to embrace meritocracy and fair play. I have been privy to many discussions about India's potential and desirability as an investment destination, and I certainly applaud the role of Indian. But no company makes money every year, and capital is fickle. Companies can be an engine of growth and raise aspirations, but they cannot single-handedly deliver social justice. It is addressing these underlying issues of governance that I believe will spell out the difference between the societies that create opportunities and the ones that create and attract opportunists. I can also look back at our own family's experience. Our own relocation to the U.S. required extreme financial hardship and uncertainty in the early stages. But there was a single, intangible, and precious belief that made that bargain worthwhile: the belief that the system was fair. It's difficult to imagine that India, or indeed any other nation, can move forward without creating that shared belief. Ideas. I would like to close with ideas. The most important thing that I learned from my father's example is that innovation is not just about putting forth a set of ideas. It's about putting forth a set of ideals as well. I never saw him engage in hollow academic debates about whether business had an obligation to give back. He believed resolutely that work was a place where we meant to put our values into practice, not into hiding, and that the purpose of organizations was to uplift people, not replace them. His willingness to help people was rooted in his deep optimism and belief that it is people who bring about change, not brilliant ideas alone. In remembering him, I hope management can move beyond a debate about whether we can do well and do good. Of course we can. If individuals struggle and succeed in doing so every day, we should demand no less of organizations. The more important question we need to answer is, how well are we doing good, and have a rigorous debate about how business can strengthen society. Creating an innovation culture is a complex task, and many new challenges will have to be answered along the way. As I look back at my father's work, though, all of his ideas began with a simple but wonderfully clarifying question: who would be better off because of this work? Having a personal stake made him impatient with ideas that seemed interesting to journals but had little impact on the ground. I also believe that this understanding was what sustained him during the inevitable challenges that arose. Because of his ideas and example, I am better off. I hope some of you in this room are better off. And nothing would make us happier than feeling that in India was in some way better off as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepa. That was exactly what we expected out of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I now turn to a man who I've grown to respect enormously over the years. A man who's led by action, a man who's led by thought, a man who inspires many of us, a man who's a shining example, Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan.